The air inside the mobile command unit tasted of ozone and hot metal. Red lights flashed across the cramped interior, painting Major Ava Rostova's face in stark, rhythmic strokes of crimson. On the main monitor, a cascade of telemetry scrolled too fast for the human eye to process, a waterfall of numbers that all screamed the same thing. Impossible. Outside, a sound began. Not a sound in the air, but a vibration in the bones. A deep, resonant thrum that seemed to pull at the very marrow. This story is a fictional scenario, an exploration of what might have been, rooted in the chilling, unresolved mystery of the Dyatlov Pass incident. Thorne, talk to me. Rostova's voice was clipped, betraying none of the tremor that ran through the deck plates. Dr. Aris Thorne did not look away from his own screen, where a gravimetric map of the immediate area was distorting into a nightmarish parody of physics. The familiar, gentle depression of their camp's mass was being consumed by a violent, deep blue spike directly beneath them. It was a gravity well, a puncture in reality, centered on a point 70 meters below the permafrost. "The field is still expanding," Aris said, his voice strained. It's geometric, a perfect exponent. It's not a natural phenomenon." A sharp cry came from the technician's station. Lena Petrova, a woman half Aris's age with twice his intuitive grasp of sensor technology, was clutching her head, a dark stain spreading from her nose down her chin. It was not just blood. It was a horrifyingly separated fluid, thin serum and thick, dark cells parting from each other in defiance of biology. "Pressure!" she gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "My skull!" Rostova was at her side in an instant, but froze when she saw the blood. Her gaze shot to Aris. The same look was in her eyes that he felt in his gut. A cold, dawning recognition. This had happened before. "It's the same pattern," Aris whispered, the words feeling like sacrilege. "Massive internal trauma. Unexplained hemorrhaging. This is what the autopsy reports described." He pointed a trembling finger at the main screen. "We are experiencing what killed them." The thrumming intensified. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into the crimson emergency lighting. On the monitor, the gravity well pulsed, a silent, predatory heartbeat emanating from the frozen heart of Dead Mountain. And Aris knew, with a certainty that chilled him more than the Siberian wind howling outside, that this was not a discovery. It was a reawakening. The year was 1959. 9 experienced hikers, students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, set out on a journey to the formidable slopes of Kholat Syakhl, the Dead Mountain. They were skilled, prepared, and in high spirits. They never returned. When the search party found their tent weeks later, it was the beginning of a mystery that would curdle into a legend. The tent had been sliced, open from the inside. The hikers' belongings were still there, but they were gone, having fled into the sub-zero wilderness inadequately dressed, some without shoes. Their bodies were found scattered across the slope, some near the remnants of a desperate fire, others further down in a ravine. The official cause of death was listed as hypothermia for most, but the details defied that simple explanation. 2 victims had fractured skulls, 2 others had major chest fractures, the kind of damage one would expect from a catastrophic car crash, yet they had no external wounds. 1 woman was missing her tongue. Their clothing contained levels of radiation significantly above normal background readings. The final chilling detail was the conclusion of the inquest. The hikers had died as a result of a compelling unknown force. The investigation was closed, the files classified, and the area was sealed off for years. What the public never knew, what was buried in the deepest archives of the GRU, was the truth behind that compelling force. 2 years prior, in 1957, something had fallen from the sky not far from the Oterten mountain range. It was not a meteorite. Soviet military patrols recovered a shard of crystalline material, no larger than a human fist, that was impossibly dense and resonated with a low, constant energy. It was alien. It was a piece of a technology so far advanced it might as well have been magic. A secret project was born. Project Svarog. Its goal was simple and terrifying: to understand the shard and, if possible, replicate its power source. In a shielded bunker buried deep beneath the Ural Mountains, Soviet scientists managed to coax the shard into revealing its nature. It was a sliver of a propulsion system, a gravity drive. They built an engine around it, a crude, brutalist cage of magnets, particle accelerators, and cooling systems designed to amplify the shard's inherent effect. They called the device the core. The initial tests were promising, creating localized temporary gravitational distortions. Then came the accident. During a full-power test, the core became unstable. The field it generated did not just bend space, it tore at the fabric of matter within it. The researchers in the chamber died instantly, their bodies subjected to tidal forces on a cellular level. They were crushed, torn, and irradiated from the inside out. The project was deemed an uncontrollable failure. The core was too dangerous, its power too volatile. The decision was made to bury it, to entomb it where it could never be found. They chose a remote, geologically stable location deep under the permafrost of a desolate mountain slope, in an area already known to be forbidding. They dug a shaft, built a containment chamber of reinforced concrete, and placed the inert core inside. They sealed the chamber and collapsed the shaft, burying their failure under tons of rock and ice. They chose Kholat Syakhl. 2 years later, 9 unsuspecting hikers pitched their tent directly over its tomb. The trace energy still leaking from the entombed core, a faint gravimetric echo, was enough to induce paranoia, terror, and ultimately a slow, agonizing death that mirrored that of the scientists. The compelling unknown force had a name: Project Svarog. 60 years later, the wind was just as relentless. Aris Thorne leaned into it, his parka pulled tight, watching the GPR sled make another pass. The expedition was a joint venture, a quiet collaboration between his Geophysical Institute and the Russian Ministry of Defense. The official story was a new survey of mineral deposits. The unofficial reason was Aris himself. His mentor, a man named Dr. Alistair Finch, had his career destroyed for proposing a fringe theory, that the Dyatlov incident was caused by a localized gravitational anomaly, possibly from a buried piece of exotic technology. Aris was here to prove him right. Major Rostova stood beside him, her face impassive, her presence a constant reminder that this was not purely a scientific endeavor. She was the guardian of the state's secrets, new and old. "Anything, Doctor?" "Patience, Major. The mountain doesn't give up its secrets easily." But even as he said it, he saw Lena, huddled in the heated GPR tent, stiffen. She waved them over, her gesture sharp and urgent. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of coffee. Lena pointed at the screen, her face pale. "I've run the scans 3 times. The software keeps flagging it as a data error, but it's not." On the display was a cross-section of the ground beneath them. Rock, ice, sediment, all rendered in predictable layers of green and brown. And then, 70 meters down, a shape. It was a perfect rectangle. A void. "It's a structure," Aris breathed, his heart hammering. "The radar signals aren't penetrating it. They're being absorbed or deflected. There's nothing natural about this." Rostova leaned closer, her professional skepticism warring with the undeniable image on the screen. "A bunker? A forgotten military installation?" At this depth? In this terrain? With no record of its construction? Aris shook his head. This is what Finch predicted. Not a bunker. A tomb. The decision was made with surprising speed. Rostova, ever the pragmatist, recognized that an unknown subterranean structure in a historically sensitive area could not be ignored. A thermal drill was brought in, a heavy, growling beast that steamed and hissed as it began its slow descent into the mountain. For 2 days, it churned through ice and rock. The team worked in shifts, monitoring the drill's progress, the sense of anticipation a palpable current running through the camp. On the 3rd day, the drill stopped. The feedback sensors indicated it had met a material its thermal laser could not vaporize, and its diamond bit could not scratch. They had reached the top of the structure. The next phase was delicate. They deployed a fiber optic probe, lowering it down the newly bored shaft. Aris, Rostova, and Lena gathered around the monitor displaying the probe's camera feed. The image was grainy, illuminated by the probe's tiny LED. They saw the scored surface of dark, seamless metal. Then, as the probe found a microscopic fissure, a seam they had not seen before, it slipped through. The camera's view stabilized. The 3 of them gasped in unison. They were looking inside a chamber. It was stark, utilitarian, and unmistakably Soviet in its design. The walls were thick, bare concrete, stained with age. But it was the object in the center of the room that seized their attention. It was a sphere, roughly 3 meters in diameter, resting on a heavy metal cradle. It was not a smooth sphere. Its surface was a complex lattice of interlocking, dark gray plates that met at impossible angles. It was a masterpiece of non-Euclidean geometry, something that hurt the eyes to look at for too long. Wires and coolant pipes, thick as a man's arm, snaked from the sphere to control consoles that lined the chamber walls. The consoles were dead, dark, and covered in a thick layer of frost. Project Svarog, Rostova whispered, the name an exhalation of awe and dread. She had access to the archives, Aris did not. She knew the name. The core, Aris corrected softly, his eyes glued to the screen. He felt a surge of triumph for his mentor, immediately followed by a wave of profound unease. It's real. Lena's fingers flew across her console. I'm picking up something. A faint energy signature, extremely low frequency, and, Doctor, look at the gravimeter on the probe. Aris looked. The reading was 1011 G, a tiny, almost imperceptible deviation, but it was there. The core was not entirely dormant. After 60 years of silence, it was still bleeding a whisper of its power into the world. We need to know what it is, what it does, Aris stated, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. Lena, can we send a signal? A simple, active ping. Let's see if it responds. Rostova put a hand on his shoulder. Doctor, the file on Svarog had one clear instruction, underlined 3 times. Do not interact. Do not attempt to activate. This object killed its creators. They tried to brute force it, Aris argued, his mind racing. They use 1950s technology. We can be subtle. A low-power diagnostic pulse. We need the data. The debate was short. The allure of the unknown, the promise of a technology that could rewrite physics, was too strong. Rostova, bound by her duty to assess any potential threat or asset, finally gave a curt nod. 1 pulse, lowest possible power. If anything happens, we pull the probe and seal the shaft. Understood? Aris nodded, his mouth dry. Understood. Lena calibrated the probe's emitter. Sending the pulse now. On the screen, the chamber remained dark and silent. For a long moment, nothing happened. A collective sigh of disappointment and relief began to form in the room. Then, on the surface of the core, A single sliver of light appeared, tracing the impossible seam between two of the dark plates. A low hum vibrated through the probe's microphone, a sound that felt ancient and vast. More lights flickered to life across the sphere, forming intricate, flowing patterns. The dead consoles along the chamber walls sparked, their screens flickering with Cyrillic text and alien diagrams. On Lena's sensor display, the gravimetric reading began to climb. 1.02 G, 1.05, 1.1. The core was waking up, and it knew they were there. The situation escalated with terrifying speed. The moment the core awakened, the subtle anomalies began. Aris felt a sharp pain in his jaw, a deep ache in his fillings, as if they were being pulled from his teeth. The coffee in his mug trembled, its surface forming miniature concentric ripples without any apparent vibration. The hum from the probe's audio feed was no longer just a sound. It was a presence, a pressure building inside the command unit. "Shut it down," Rostova ordered, her voice tight. "Kill the emitter." "Too late," Lena said, her eyes wide. "It's not drawing power from the probe anymore. It's self-sustaining. The energy output is increasing on its own." The gravimetric reading hit 1.5 G. The deck plates of the command unit groaned. Aris felt a leaden weight settle on his shoulders, making it difficult to breathe. The core was not just a power source. It was an engine, and it was spooling up, generating a gravity field that was now extending beyond its concrete tomb and reaching for them. "What is it doing?" Rostova demanded, gripping the edge of a console to steady herself. Aris stared at the telemetry, his mind struggling to process the flood of impossible data. The core wasn't just emitting gravity, it was creating complex, focused waves. It was projecting force with surgical precision. "It's not random," he muttered. "It's a sequence. It's calculating something." It was then that Lena's nose began to bleed. The horrifying, separated fluid was the first clear sign that the field was becoming hostile to biological matter. The core's influence was beginning to replicate the very conditions described in the Dyatlov autopsies. It was exerting tidal forces at a microscopic level, pulling cells apart, shearing tissue, and crushing bone without breaking the skin. A panicked voice crackled over the radio. It was the perimeter guard. "Major, we have a man down. Corporal Vasco. He just collapsed. His chest. God, it's caved in." Rostova grabbed the radio. "Report. What happened?" "Nothing. He was just standing there and he folded. There was a cracking sound. He's not breathing." Aris felt a cold dread wash over him. Just like the hikers. Crushed ribs with no external trauma. The core was not a bomb. It was a weapon that dissected its victims from the inside out. "Major, the field is intensifying. It's targeting stress points. Anything denser than the surrounding tissue. Bone, metal fillings, equipment." The lights in the command unit flickered violently, and the main monitor showing the probe's camera feed went black. Lena cried out, trying to restore the link. "I've lost the feed. The probe is crushed." The thrumming intensified, the pressure becoming unbearable. It felt as if the entire mountain was pressing down on them. A hairline crack appeared in the reinforced window of the command unit. "This is a containment failure," Rostova declared, her face a grim mask. She toggled a secure channel on her radio. "This is Major Rostova, authorizing Protocol Svarog 0. Prepare the thermobaric charges. On my mark, you will collapse the shaft and the chamber. We are burying this thing now." "No," Aris shouted, stumbling towards her. The increased gravity made every movement a struggle. "You can't. You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand that my men are dying, Doctor," Rostova shot back, her hand hovering over the detonation command on her datapad. "This thing is a weapon, and it is out of control." "It's not a weapon," Aris insisted, his mind racing, piecing together the fragments of data they had received before the probe died. The energy signature, the complex waves, the way it responded to their signal. It's a drive, a propulsion system. The shard they found was a fragment of an engine. This is their attempt to rebuild it. When we pinged it, we didn't just wake it up. We gave it a signal. It thinks we're trying to give it instructions. It's trying to plot a course, to navigate. But it's getting garbled data from our instruments, from our own biosignatures. The lethal field is a side effect of a failed calculation. The structure of the command unit groaned again, a sound of tortured metal. The gravimetric reading, now an estimate based on their last received data, was likely approaching 2G. Soon, their own bodies would begin to fail. "It's trying to go somewhere," Aris gasped, leaning heavily on a console. "If you bury it now, while it's in this state, you won't neutralize it. You'll create a permanent, unstable gravimetric anomaly, a black hole that will slowly, over decades, eat this entire mountain range. You won't be burying a secret. You'll be planting a seed of destruction." Rostova stared at him, her eyes narrowed. The lives of her remaining soldiers against the unproven, desperate theory of a scientist. Her duty was clear. Her finger moved toward the command. "Wait," Lena choked out from her station. She had managed to recover a single corrupted data packet from the moments before the probe was destroyed. It was a fragment of the core's output. On her screen, it resolved into an image, a star chart. But the constellations were alien, unrecognizable. "It's not just trying to go somewhere, Doctor," Lena said, her voice filled with a terrifying awe. "It's trying to go home." That was the moment the paradigm shifted. This was not a Soviet superweapon. It was a failed attempt to reverse engineer a technology they could not possibly comprehend. They had built a cage around a starship's engine, and 60 years later, it was still trying to answer a call from across the galaxy. The pressure was now a physical agony. Aris felt the cartilage in his knees grinding, his ribs creaking with every shallow breath. The command unit's frame was visibly warping, the door no longer square. They had seconds, maybe a minute, before the structure failed and crushed them. "If it's a navigation system, what does it need?" Aris thought aloud, his voice a ragged whisper. "It needs a clear signal, a destination, a final command. It's stuck in a loop, trying to interpret the noise of our technology as a coordinate. We have to give it what it wants." "Give it what it wants?" Rostova repeated, incredulous. "Thorne, it is killing us." "Because we're speaking gibberish to it," he countered, pushing himself upright. He turned to Lena. "The emitter on the main comms antenna, is it still functional?" "Yes, but the field is causing interference." "We have to send it one last signal," Aris said, his eyes burning with desperate conviction. "Not a query, a command, a coherent string of data that it can interpret as a final instruction. Something simple, universal, a prime number sequence." "You want to talk to it?" Rostova scoffed, though the certainty in her voice was wavering. "I want to tell it to leave," Aris corrected. "It's a drive. It's meant to fold space, to travel. We either give it the key to turn the engine off by completing its sequence, or its failed attempts to start will tear this whole place apart. It's our only chance." Rostova looked from Aris's face to the star chart on Lena's screen, then back to the red light on her data pad that would entomb them all. She was a soldier, trained to neutralize threats. But she was also a guardian of secrets, and she was standing at the threshold of the greatest secret in human history. To destroy it felt like a greater failure than to risk everything on a madman's theory. "Do it," she said, her voice barely audible over the groaning of the hull. Lena's fingers, shaking, flew across the keyboard. She bypassed the safety protocols, routing all available power to the main communications dish. "Broadcasting a prime number sequence from 1 to 199. It's the clearest, most artificial signal I can generate." "Send it," Aris commanded. Lena hit enter. For a terrifying second, nothing changed. Then the deep thrumming from beneath them stopped. The silence was more shocking than the noise had been. The crushing weight on their bodies intensified tenfold, pinning them to the floor. Aris felt his vision tunnel to a pinpoint of gray as the gravity spike became absolute. The air was squeezed from his lungs. The lights in the command unit did not just flicker, they exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging them into total darkness. This is it, he thought. We failed. And then, it was over. The pressure vanished, not slowly but instantly, as if a switch had been flipped. Aris took a ragged, desperate breath, the air tasting clean and cold. The groaning of the metal stopped. The only sound was the howl of the wind outside, a sound he had never been so grateful to hear. Emergency power kicked in, casting the room in a dim, sterile white light. Rostova was on her knees, breathing heavily. Lena was slumped over her console, conscious but shaking. Aris pushed himself to his feet, his limbs feeling unnaturally light. He stumbled to the sensor station. The gravimetric map was flat. A perfect baseline 1G. The energy signature was gone. The anomaly beneath them had vanished. "Lena," he said, his voice hoarse. "The chamber. Can you get a signal from any of the seismic sensors we planted?" She nodded weakly, typing a command with trembling fingers. A new graphic appeared on the screen. A simple, low-resolution seismic scan of the area 70 meters below. It showed a hollow concrete room. An empty room. The core was gone. It had not exploded. It had not melted down. It had simply left. It had taken their signal as the final part of its equation, calculated its jump, and vanished from their dimension. Rostova slowly got to her feet, her gaze fixed on the screen. She looked at Aris, and for the first time, he saw not a soldier, but a fellow witness to the impossible. The pistol she had considered using was still holstered at her side. She made no move to draw it. In the aftermath, a quiet, unspoken agreement settled over the survivors of the expedition. The official report, signed by Major Rostova, was a masterpiece of bureaucratic misdirection. It cited unforeseen geological instability and equipment failure due to extreme magnetic interference from a natural iron deposit. The expedition was aborted. The casualties were attributed to a structural collapse in a temporary shelter during a sudden micro-blizzard. The Dyatlov Pass incident, the report concluded, remained a mystery, likely the result of a rare weather event like an infrasound-induced avalanche. The file was closed, again. The secret of Project Svarog was buried under a fresh layer of classified paper, deeper than any permafrost. Weeks later, Aris sat in his quiet university office, the hum of his computer a poor substitute for the terrifying thrum of the core. He had been exonerated, his mentor's theories posthumously vindicated within the shadowed circles of the intelligence community that now monitored him. He was a hero to a handful of people who could never acknowledge his achievement. It was a hollow victory. He looked at the single file he had copied from Lena's console before the mission's data logs were wiped. It was the last packet of information the core had transmitted before it vanished. It was not a transmission to them, but a final system log, a confirmation of its destination coordinates. He had spent weeks running the alien star chart through every astronomical database he could access. He had finally found a match. The star chart was not a map from Earth to some distant star. It was the opposite. It was a map from a star system in the Triangulum Galaxy, 2.7 million light-years away, with a direct, calculated route pointing to a very specific destination. A small, blue-green planet in the Orion arm of the Milky Way. The core had not been lost. It had been a probe. A scout. The Soviets had not built an engine. They had repaired a beacon. Aris Thorne closed the file. They had not silenced a weapon or solved a historical mystery. They had answered a 60-year-old distress call, and in doing so, had confirmed their location on a galactic map. They had given a lost piece of alien technology a ride home, and now, something 2.7 million light-years away, knew not only that humanity existed, but precisely where to find them.